Sorry, one more time.
I said you can repeat what you
Okay.
just said.
So my main problems was just discouragement and doubt due to the fact that I've been doing a lot of these, putting a lot of time into concentration practices, and it seems like nothing at all has changed in terms of my ability to like stay on the breath or get more calm or restful. I guess it just seems like it's literally the same as day one almost. Maybe slight
Okay.
changes, but um, yeah, that's my
All
main
right.
issues.
Okay. Well, the very first thing that we can say about this is that the Dhamma of the Buddha is good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end, which means that if you are practicing correctly, you will get good value out of it, so that if you feel stuck or something, that means that you're not practicing correctly according to the Dhamma.
All right.
Okay. And that you know somehow or another that you're not practicing correctly to the Dhamma simply because of all those doubts that have come up.
Yeah.
Right? What is this? What is that? Am I getting anywhere? Am I doing it right? I know all of those questions that come up. Every student has them, some more than others. And surprisingly enough, the students that don't have too much of those kind of questions are the ones that are more likely to be practicing correctly. And the ones who really have those kind of questions are the ones who are not. So something inside you already knows.
Yeah.
You already know something. And that's possibly why you called. And I'm just recognizing that you know really what's going on. And so we need to find a kind of a course correction. Now, um, for some reason or another, um, the, the Buddhism that has come to the West has come in drips and drabs. It's come with a little bit of this lineage and a little bit of that lineage and a little bit of Mahayana, a little bit of Theravada, and a little bit of this and that. And part of those little bits have been like interesting high points. So that one of the things that gets spread around is something that the students think that they should do or must do, or will get good value out of doing. And that in fact they wind up making the same mistakes that have been made throughout all of history. It's the same mistake over and over and over again. Okay. And the Buddha also made that same mistake. And the reason that he did was because when he left his palace, he left with his entourage, he left with a horse, he left with a groom to take for the horse. So he was princely when he left. Eventually, they let the horse go. But then the Buddha, because of his very high status, was well received into every well-known religious organization and or guru and or meditation teacher, everything that they had available. It would be readily available to him. He would be a welcome to new students, especially since he had already been trained in the Vedas for his whole life, because he in fact took his teacher Khandana with him. And so he got to these very best teachers, and they taught jhana, they taught meditation, they taught formless, they taught neither perception nor non-perception, they taught nothingness, and they taught all of those kind of things. And it took the Buddha 6 years after having very, very strong background, because we know that even as a child he had already attained first jhana. And so it took him about 6 years of intense instruction from the best available. And at one point with every teacher, except for perhaps the last teacher. was, thank you very much. You understand and I understand that I have learned everything that you have to teach, because normally they want him to become the head teacher now.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, no, thank you, because I'm trying to answer a different question. And the jhanas don't answer that question. So that's the first thing to understand. But we do understand that the Buddha, after he got then into deep austerities and made himself almost so weak that he couldn't even crawl out of a stream, he realized that he needs to have some strength. And starving himself was not the right thing to do. So he sat down and basically he went home and thought about his life out of the Star Wars movie. And so when he thought about it, that's when he began to put together the whole issue was, why was he out there? What was the point? The point was is that he wanted to eliminate suffering, and here he is giving himself a whole bunch of it. Caught in this dual world between the high jhanas that are enormously pleasurable and the austerities, which are designed to burn off old past karma, where in fact they're only just adding new pain, new karma.
Mm-hmm.
But the belief is that, oh, we have to eliminate old bad karma before we can finally get moksha, finally get release. And he recognized, oh no, what we have to do is find a middle path. There's a middle path between all of this. On one extreme is the extreme sensual pleasures that come out of jhana, and the um, extreme other end of austerities, of harming ourselves, of doing things that are wrong. Now, even the ordinary mind, as you well know, the ordinary mind is full of suffering.
Yeah.
Even before you start putting razor blades on your arm to cut yourself, which teenage girls are wont to do. All right? Because they have so much self doubt, so much self pity, they don't see a way out. They get deep into despair and then they start harming themselves. That's the way of the West. And the way of the East is, oh, if I cut myself now, that'll help me to not cut myself later, which is really a stupid belief system, believe me. And so, what we have to do is find this middle point. What's the balance position? What's the most middle of the middle path between the sensual pleasures of jhana and this? And by the way, a lot of people think that this middle path is between austerities and sensual pleasures that you find at the brothel. But the Buddha is actually saying to this group of people who have been with him practicing jhana for all of these years. And so that was his audience for the middle path. And when we understand that, we say, oh, wait a minute, the sensual desire problem that he's got is with the jhanas. People get into those states and they like it, and because they like it, they will get attached to it, they fall in love with it, and that when they come out of jhana, then they're all the way back to normal. They're all the way back to ordinary. So they only have the possibility of flip-flopping back and forth without finding that restful middle place.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the teaching is all about, and the Buddha has actually named that as first jhana. That first jhana is the middle path. The first jhana is the path to enlightenment. And this is the story of the Buddha sitting under the rose apple tree. Now, this is a common issue. This story that I'm telling you needs to be told over and over again so that the guys begin to get it, because you're going to be failing at concentration. If you really want to practice a concentration meditation, come sit on my porch or come to Thailand. You're going to have to get away from almost everything that you think of as Hawaii and go find the original Hawaii And there you can find concentration. But it won't do you any good. But the way that you're practicing it now, a little bit here and a little bit there, is not going to work. When you're going to have to focus your mind and get it really strongly focused, you need to spend some time with that. Got to get away from it all. Got to get
Yeah.
into solitude, seclusion. All right. In fact, from the very beginning of meditation, we need to get into seclusion just to get the mind straightened out. And there's two major steps before the student ever gets to the first jhana. But then after we get into the first jhana, we learn to manage the first jhana, we learn to control the first jhana, then we put that kind of mind that's fit for work to good use. And what is that good use? We're going to put it to work. We're going to gather together all of the parts of the mind so that we can have a mind that is actually focused on and can tell a story about what's happening right here, right now. And then that story becomes a story of the Four Noble Truths. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering, and I recognize it. This is what it's like to be free from suffering. And this is the path to get there. Over and over and over again, we practice this. And if the mind is fit for work, you can do it very quickly. If the mind is not fit for work, then it may be much slower. Surprisingly enough, the ordinary mind can get this Dhamma much quicker than the jhana dudes who were stuck into such high places. They're not really paying attention to the Dhamma at all. They're lost off in that, really, this is my stuff. And they just can't get out of that. And so when you use the word concentration with me, I say, wait a minute, let's tap on the brakes right here now and take a really close look at what we're doing. Because normally the guys that are lusting after and wanting concentration don't even recognize it when it's there. Because everything that you have is never enough. It's like being way up on the porch and you've got to climb the stairs to get up to the porch, and there's 8 or 10 steps. And you cry because you're on the landing, and then you cry because you're on the first step, and then you cry because you're on the second step because you're not at that landing yet. And you don't even recognize that you're stepping your way there, and you're doing so in great suffering and in great misery.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're doing. So the first thing we need to do is to lay out a bit of the path. And the bit of the path is basically, it's twofold. One is that you have a strong knowledge that is so strong. The word is shraddha. And the word shraddha does not translate to faith. We'll give that word to Christians because they've already got it defined. And so everybody understands faith in that Christian definition. We're going to take it and use the word confidence. You can see how faith and confidence would be the same thing, except that faith is always blind. Confidence is the better you get at it, the more championships you win on your way up the ladder, then the more confident you are that you're going to take that top prize, the top part of humanity. What's the very best, highest quality of humanity? Well, we would think of it as someone who would be noble, who would be statesmanlike, who would be honorable, who would tell the truth, who is generous, who is worthy of being a friend of. This is the high quality that is the summation or the top peak of humanity. This is what we would mean by the word samadhi. That the word samadhi is wrongly translated into English as concentration. But the word concentration does not exactly fit. In fact, what we think of as concentration is normally getting down to the essence of things by throwing out the unnecessary. And so we throw, like with concentrated orange juice, they throw the water out. They can get it down to a powder, but they have to put a lot of sugar in. We can concentrate milk, right? This is the way that, and so we kind of think of the mind as concentrating in the sense of kind of pressurizing, but also throwing things out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Samadhi doesn't mean that. Samadhi has a completely different quality to it. It means the peak of the mind in the sense of, do you know what a yurt is?
No.
A yurt is the teepee like
Oh.
tent house that is used in Mongolia and in Asia places where they are nomadic because of the climatic conditions they live in. And that the earth like is very much like a teepee, in the sense there's a top point of the teepee where all of the poles are tied together.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Many buildings are that way. Capitol buildings, for instance, have a peak or an apex, the top of it. That would be the samadhi of the building. And many buildings are built that way. A teepee is like that. A yurt is like that. So the yurt has a center pole, and then all of the ridge poles work all the way around it. And so all of those ridge poles gain their strength and add together to make the tent strong with that top point. That top point is the high point, and it's also the point where all of the energy is collected together. All right. So this is what we mean then when we talk about having a unified mind. Where the mind is unified. All right. This state of mind that we're talking about, a unified mind, is very much like the first jhana. Getting the mind unified in the sense that the mind is not scattered from thought to thought, that it
Mm-hmm.
does not move according to what Freud called free association, just moving thought to thought to thought, which is how most conversations with people go. We'll just ramble on from topic to topic to topic. Eric is calling. Can we add him to the call?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine. Hello.
Hello, Eric.
Hey, what's up?
What's up?
Not too much.
This is Shane in Hawaii, and Eric is where now?
Arkansas.
Arkansas, that's right. Arkansas.
Yeah, yeah.
The land of the free and the home of the Clintons. I got it.
Yeah, one way to put it. The Huckabees.
All right. We're in the process of a conversation about unification of mind. So if you don't mind, you can just fit right in, and we'll see if we can point some things back as reminders to help you catch up.
Sounds good to me.
And that what we've been talking about is doubt about the practice that arises when students are not practicing correctly. And that when students are practicing correctly and getting the benefits out of the practice from right from the get-go, then they understand that, and because of that, confidence starts to grow. But if we feel unsuccessful, then a lot of doubt will remain because we're expecting some results. I mean, I really am putting the time in it. Why am I not getting some benefit out of it? And I don't want some Dhamma teacher to tell me it's because of my karma. So, what we need to do is get the mind to a balanced place. That normally the Buddha, first thing he taught was the middle path. And the middle path is the middle path between sensual desires or looking for pleasure and using pain as a tool to gain something. A lot of people will put good karma in that place. I'm going to do something that's painful. I'm going to make a sacrifice in the hopes of getting something of value later. All right? And we do that in 10,000 different ways. So the Buddha says that either one of those extremes, and he nearly killed himself with austerities, with the idea that you pain now gains you freedom from pain later. Almost like the teenage girl cuts her arm with a razor now to avoid having to do it 5 years from now. You know, that kind of mentality makes no sense at all, and yet that's the kind of thing that people do until we show them a clear example of it. But animal sacrifices, the Buddha was very much against the Brahmins doing animal sacrifices. They wanted to do animal sacrifices because guess what happened to the meat after the ceremony? Dinner for the Brahmins. So, the whole idea then is to find this balance point, this middle place, this place where it has the right amount of pleasure. Just the right amount of pleasure. And that point is what the Buddha calls the first jhana in Sutta number 36, where this is discussed. He's talking about why would I be afraid of the pleasures of first jhana? And then he recognized that, wait a minute, the first jhana is actually the path that we're looking for. They had already kind of put together that the first jhana was a very, very pleasant state to live in. If we can get the mind in that kind of state. So now that he's figured that out, he then went to put together the entire pathway because he had already done enough jhana, like the very best. And so he knew what the mind was like because he had experienced it. And so he put together this entire path because he finally asked the right question. So the right guy with the right training finally asked the right question. And the right question is, why are we doing anything? The answer is to avoid suffering. Everything is due to pain avoidance, to suffer. We want to get out of suffering. And he says, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to find out the Eightfold Noble Path. The first thing we have to do is define suffering. The second thing we have to do is define how it happens, where it's caused. And the third one is to give people the experience of what it's like, at least on a momentary basis from time to time, of what it's like to be free from suffering, because you can get yourself into states of free from suffering quite easily. And it's actually a very pleasant state, and it's normally then would be referred to as the first jhana. The people have little nibbana moments. You should intentionally have more and more little nibbana moments.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
When we're talking about first jhana, are we talking about like the absorbed concentration state or like something else right now?
I'm getting into the definition of it. Please hang in. Please hang in there. We will define it completely. In fact, I have been giving smidgens all along. Okay, I've been talking about samadhi, where the mind becomes one-pointed and focused in the sense of not being scattered. We're also talking about pleasure, so we're actually defining it right along the way, okay? And we will come down to a list of actual answers. So, the path itself that the Buddha laid out has 5 major qualities and 3 additional ones. The 5 major qualities is actually 4 of the items lead to the 5th. All right, and this is how it works, is that first off it starts with right noble view. If we understand it correctly, right noble view is the most important thing. It comes first. And what is going to be a support for, all of these things are going to be supports and requisites for right noble concentration. Now, right noble concentration, forget the word concentration, go back to Samadhi, go back to the point of a tent, where everything is collected together at the top of the tent with all the ridge poles. We also have teepees, we have Capitol buildings, we have all kinds of buildings to show that. And we also have clear definitions of what it is in humanity. The very best kind of top of humanity has nothing to do with how much money he has, but it has to do, well, number one, with clear thinking, which you would call such a one noble, honorable, honest, upright, having integrity, having collectedness. In other words, he doesn't tell a lie because he has no conflict of interest. His interests are unified. That's what the whole idea of a church steeple or a cathedral has a point. A Capitol building has a point. That many, many different structures have a top point. And so what we're going to be doing throughout the whole practice is to unify the mind more and more often to be in that state so that you are, in fact, from moment to moment, the very best there is that humanity has to offer. From point to point, from moment to moment, from time to time, when you remember and you've got your stuff together. That's back from the 1970s. Get your shit together, you know. This is what we're talking about. Concentration is like getting rid of the shit, but with Samadhi, it's more getting your shit together. I had forgotten about that phrase, and I've been telling this story so many times to so many students, and that's all right. So how are we going to get our shit together? But this is one's right view: is let's get this shit together. So now we have 3 new tools. One of the tools is the most important tool of all, and that is sati, to remember, to remember, to remember, to remember that what we're here for is to get our shit together. That is so fun. And and by the way, doubt is not part of that, because doubt destroys the unity. Or a better way of saying it, doubt is pointing out the disunity. And so the right attitude of getting our stuff together and then coming to remembering it over and over and over and over and over again. This is what we've got to do. This is what we've got to do. We've got to follow right view. One way of saying it is like this. You may have heard this before, and that is that good advice is easy. The world is full of good advice. Your mama's got good advice. Your teacher's got good advice. Lawyers, doctors, Indian chiefs, accountants, they've all got good advice in their own areas. The problem with good advice is that nobody knows or nobody takes good advice just when they need to take it most. It's very much like Murphy's Law. If things can go wrong, they will go wrong, and they'll go wrong at just the right minute or just the wrong time. Like, for instance, when does a hotel computer fail? It fails when the hotel is full. It doesn't fail when they've only got 1 or 2 rooms. They know the computer will fail when the hotel is full. So that means also that we need to practice this sati so that sati will come at the point in time when we need it the most. So that instead of acting badly, we'll act in this noble fashion. So sati is the key. That's the number one. But the second point, which is the one that the Westerners seem to have the most trouble with, is the right effort. Right noble effort. Now think about the effort that a noble is going to take, and you wind up saying, hey, wait a minute, he actually walks slowly, perhaps carries a cane, maybe a parasol if it's the heat of the day. But a noble, his right effort is going to get really big, important things done. He is not a burdener, not carrying a big burden. So when we talk about right noble effort, we're not talking about burdening yourself down or giving yourself a lot of work to do. That in fact, that's exactly why it takes so long to get concentration, is because the students are working too hard. They don't have right effort nailed down yet. It's really hard to relax, you know, especially when you're working really hard at it. And in fact, when we're practicing concentration, it's simply because we're wanting something that we don't already have and is difficult to attain. But the Buddhist method is to just do it when you can think of it over and over and over and over again. And every time you do, if you do it with right effort, you will wind up in first jhana every time, for just a short period of time. And then you'll fall back out of it again. And then there'll come a time when it seems to be fairly stable, except that even though I can watch my breath and I'm present and I'm here now, still the mind will wander. Have you ever had that experience? Both of you are shaking your heads yes. Okay, so the mind, you think that you're meditating, but you know kind of in the background something. All right.
It's like you're calm, but you know your mind's wandering, but you still feel like you're in the state of, you still feel like maybe you're in the jhana, but maybe, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Okay, all right. So to finish the whole process off, then we have to go lasso that dude. That wandering mind has been wandering all along. Now you're actually watching it wander. You know it's there. But in the beginning, we keep bringing things back to, so there's just a little bit more that has to be brought back to the here now. And that is that wandering mind, and we're going to do it by putting it to work. And how we put it to work is with the concept of applied and sustained thought. We're going to apply that wandering mind to an object, and then we're going to sustain it on that object. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to start telling a story about what's going on right now. Think of it as a witness. You have two kinds of witnesses. One kind of witness is the witness that saw what happened. The second kind of witness is that same guy sitting in a particular box beside a judge telling a story. All right? Notice those two details because they're very, very important. The first kind of witness that actually sees it is going to be there all along, and he's going to actually still be there in jhana all the way through the trip. But that second witness is who you want to put on that witness stand and tell that story so that we can get it straight about what's happening right now. And that's what we're going to do in first jhana. We're going to have that witness and we're going to put him to work and we're going to have him repeat this stuff over and over again. I see this, I see this, I see this. Not just actually seeing it, but actually saying I see it. This is what the Mahasi method calls noting. Now, in the beginning, we want the students will normally have strong noting, but as it settles in, the noting will remain so that it keeps the mind from wandering. but it's not working so hard in the method called perception. We don't have to really think and say out loud, itch, rise, fall, touch, sit, itch. We just move from those things, but we're tracking to make sure that we know that we're doing that. This is what we mean by actual investigation. All right, so this will put the mind to work. Imagine it is like this. Imagine you've already both learned to read, and sometimes you're really good at it, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're not good at it because you'll read something, you like what you're reading, you're thinking about what you're reading, and then you start thinking more and more while the eyes are still going along the page, but we're not reading actually. And we get to the next paragraph and we recognize, wait a minute, I don't even know what they're talking about now. Why? Because that's the ordinary mind, what we would call the monkey mind. But there's also times that you can read that you know that you can read. You're following along sentence by sentence. You know that you're following along sentence by sentence. And when it gets to the end of the paragraph, you've got the point. And when you start up the next paragraph, you know what they're talking about because you've just read what they were reading and you got the information deeply. Now, many times people will read a book that's very dense or complex and they'll just all of a sudden stop getting the data in. The eyes will go by, but like math books, sometimes a math book, that one little sentence or that one paragraph or especially that half page has to be read over and over and over again until we actually get down to what it's actually saying so that we can really comprehend it. And so this is also that quality of First John is keep going over and over and over the same things over and over again so that we begin to see what's going on, especially in reference to the Eightfold Noble Path that we've already been practicing, by the way, and the entire Four Noble Truths, how the Eightfold Path fits in. So this is how it works. You're sitting there in meditation session with the idea, at least the right view of, I'm going to watch the breath. Then the mind wanders away from the breath. And there's wanders. The mind wanders. It's been wandering for 30 years now. Well, it depends upon which mind it is, but minds, I think, have been wandering for literally hundreds of thousands of years. All they go. We populated the whole world with a wandering mind. Done a lot of damage along the way. So, the wandering mind, then, that's a normal state. But seeing the wandering mind, waking up to the wandering mind, noting that the mind has wandered away from the breath, that's sati. Is to remember just at that particular point in time to do the right thing. Now that we remember to do the right thing, we've got to take the right effort to do that. This is also a path factor. Right effort, right sati, and right view run in circle around each other.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, we now then, with the right effort I'll explain in a moment, has to then be brought back to the breath. And the right effort, in fact, is helped along with right attitude. And the right attitude is not an attitude of a loser, but the attitude of a winner. We need to develop the skill of being successful, to being a lion, to being a winner, to stop being a victim of this monkey mind and to come back to the breath satisfied. And after we do that over and over and over and over again, we will gain confidence that we can do this to the point that we'll say, no matter how obstructed the mind is, no matter how it wants to wander back to that same point, I can catch it there and grab it and pull it back. Rather than feeling sad and guilty because the mind wanders away, we feel like a champion of being able to grab it and pull it back. Let me repeat that. This is a major point because Westerners tend to want to feel bad because the mind wanders away. No, that's its normal state. That's like being angry at a dog because it's laying down. That's a normal state. They're both over there laying down right now. So the normal state is what we're trying to disrupt. And when we're capable of doing that, we can do that as a champion, as a winner, not just as a survivor, but as a champion. You become a champion of your own life. In other words, you start taking on that noble attitude that I am at the highest peak of humanity when I can control my own mind. Gosh, how many times philosophers have said that one? And now we're actually teaching you precisely how to do that. Over and over and over and over again. This is why people do practice. And that is that you sit there just enjoying your breathing as long as you can. And then all of a sudden you recognize the mind has wandered away. And that's when we start this cycle over again. Aha, I caught you. And so with that right effort, aha, I caught you actually brings the mind back into the present. And so you want to sit there, but as you sit there, the mind will start to wander away in the background again. And then it will get louder and louder, and we'll even forget about the breathing and go off going to that. And then we get lost in it. And then later we'll figure it out. Oh, wait a minute, I was here to watch the breath. And then we come back. So basically, this background thing that we're talking about is actually the preliminary. And the sooner that you can catch it, the easier it is to bring it back. And finally, you get it to the point of putting it to work. And the work that it has to do is to watch this present moment in the following ways: the body, the feelings, the mind itself, the condition of the mind, the state of the mind, the sharpness of the mind, the ability of the mind, and we begin to watch that mind as a preliminary to Paticca Samuppada. And then we begin to put into the mind's objects that which we want, as opposed to putting things in there that are random from the past, the hindrances. We're going to put into the mind that which we want to put into the mind. And what are we going to put into the mind? We're going to put in the mind Four Noble Truths. We're going to put in the mind the four foundations of mindfulness. We're going to put into mind the five aggregates. And we'll talk about those. The five aggregates and the four foundations of mindfulness are exactly the same thing. They're just different ways of looking at it as the structure moves down in a pyramid. And that structure, the top of it, is the second noble truth. The apex of that whole structure is all about what is the cause of suffering. The answer is because I'm ignorant about my feelings. That's basically the whole thing. So if we become wise about our feelings, voila, then we've got it. We've got our life made. If we can control our feelings, then we can bring the mind to a very, very high state of nobility. Because that's one of the qualities of a noble is that he never freaks out. In a lightning storm, everybody jumps except the noble. He can maintain, he does not have startle reflex. All right, so these are the kinds of things that are noble, and you can get your mind in that unified state. So even a very loud noise does not disrupt it. But that's kind of close to the top. That's close to the Samadhi point. Is when the mind is so unified that even a very loud noise, or perhaps somebody putting a gun in your face, say, "Give me your money." What are you going to do? I'm going to smile and say, "It's in my hip pocket. You mind if I get it out?" Here, take the whole wallet.
Wow.
Have a good day.
So you really feel like if that scenario happened, you could your samadhi, I guess, would be so strong that it wouldn't affect you too much.
Yeah,
Wow.
you're going to die.
Yeah.
Can you die in samadhi? Suppose the guy says, "No, I'm going to shoot you anyway." And then he shoots you right in the chest. What are you going to do? Are you going to fall down and die miserably and angry because he shot you, or are you going to fall down happily saying bye? Choice is yours. Depends upon how strong your unification of mind is, and that we're working on that, practicing that, getting that mind strong. We don't need it concentrated. We need it fit for work. In fact, we need it the most before we walk down that alley. We should have had the wisdom to not go down that alley. It was a dark alley. Dangerous. A bit of wisdom will say, don't go into dangerous places.
So I guess I shouldn't be so discouraged that I'm not feeling super concentrated. It should feel like success if I'm cultivating these positive mind states.
Yes. Yes, you want to start to develop that right attitude right from the very beginning. The attitude of success, the attitude of satisfaction, that you become satisfied with your practice. Remember, it's good in the beginning. So be satisfied with your practice. That's the skill that needs to be developed. You've already got dissatisfaction nailed down solid. You know how to do that one.
Yeah.
So working on satisfaction.
Got it.
Who was it? Gosh, I forget his name. I can't get no satisfaction.
Mick Jagger. Are you?
Big Jagger, that's the dude. That's the dude. If he's still around, ask him to call me. I'll give him some satisfaction. Actually, I won't. I'll tell him how to get it on his own.
All right.
So,
I think
yes.
that's.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's. I got everything that I wanted to talk about. So if Eric, you wanted to go on with whatever you wanted to talk to him about.
Okay. Are you
That's
sure?
fine. Yeah,
You
I
think you got it? All right. Well, if you do, that's really excellent. You go practice in this new way.
All right.
Let me add a few points, though.
Sure.
One of the very important classical, right there in the suttas, definition of dukkha is wanting things you don't have. Even if you want first jhana and don't have it, that's suffering. There is no reason for you to suffer at all. Instead, if you want first jhana, just do it. You've done it so many hundreds of times in your life. Just take a load off.
All right. I guess one question, if I could. You know, when you tell me to breathe in, feel the satisfaction, it doesn't.
Yes.
Like, what if it doesn't always feels like not real? I guess I don't know. Like, it's just.
Then
Like
take another one. And if that doesn't work, hold your breath for at least 3 minutes. And then take a deep breath and see if you like that one.
Okay. All right, got it.
In other words, get used to the fact that you're a breathing being that has been not paying attention to the body, not paying attention to the breath. And if you find no satisfaction in there, that means there's a part of you that's dead. I mean, what's the point about being alive anyway?
I have to stop. I've had that same thing, but I just have to stop looking for satisfaction and just be exactly with the breath, and then it's there. You know, then it's there. If you're just there, if you're just with the breath, you don't need anything else. I mean, you're not looking for satisfaction. You're not looking for anything. You're just, that's it.
That's exactly it. That satisfaction is when you're not looking for anything, that you can actually enjoy this particular moment.
Yeah.
That's what we also refer to as a little nirvana. And why? Well, one of the problems with the way that Nibbana is discussed is in the sense of being unconditioned. Well, think about something that's on the stove cooking, or perhaps a pie in the oven, pizza pie, and you take the pie out of the oven. Now that the heat is off, the pizza pie is going to cool down. So, in fact, the conditioning is the heat. What is the heat? Wanting. Wanting to get rid of, wanting in the sense of I don't know what it is, I'm confused, all kinds of wanting to know, wanting to have, wanting to scratch, to get rid of an itch. All of these things are suffering. And we begin to see that. And you're talking about now the experience of getting into a state where you don't want anything. That's the state, that's the noble state. When you get down to the point that you don't want anything, that's the practice point. That is, in fact, an experience of the third noble truth. What it's like to be free from suffering is to be free from greed, ill will, and delusion in that just little moment. And it's very good for you to see it and to recognize it and to be there with it so we can say, got ya! Now I got you. Now I know what I'm looking for. Well, I can do this again. I know I can do this again. I can do this over and over and over again. And I know I can do it. And that's the first knowledge. The first knowledge that is noble, super mundane, and a part of the path is that thing that makes us different than the ordinary people. Ordinary people are victims. Ordinary people, we are raised as children, as being the underling, and we wind up being under what I'm now referring to as GREB, G-R-E-B. Government, religion, education, and business. That's our society.
Mm-hmm.
And government, religion, education, and business are your bosses. And you have been doing what they were telling you to do for so long a period of time. But now a noble does not have any bosses. That's one of the qualities of a noble, is he does not answer to anyone. He answers to his own drummer. He answers to his own spiritual awakening, if you want to call it in bullshit terms, his own spiritual awakening. But practicality is that he knows suffering and he knows how to avoid it. And being somebody's lackey is suffering. Being a victim to somebody else's wants and desires is suffering.
Yeah.
Wanting that car that they want you to buy because they put a girl beside it on the showroom floor, that's suffering. I don't want that car. I like it, but I don't want it. But we'll discuss that at a later time when we begin to really inspect how the mind works. But right now we're talking about, let's start having those little Nibbana moments.
Okay.
Over and over and over again. That first jhana is marvelous. It's wonderful to get into a state where you don't want anything. But in fact, all of that wanting is the hindrances that we're trying to push out. And when we get to the point that they're out of there, then we can get into that state of not wanting. And that's the mind that then we could, if we really, really wanted to drag that word concentration back in, we can say that it's concentrated enough. It's unified enough so that we can put it to work to see how things really are. And we're going to see it through the map that has been created from the Buddha. It's called the Four Noble Truths. That's the map that we're going to look for in reality. We're going to look for certain landmarks. Imagine that you were flying a very small Piper plane and you were lost. But all you had was a compass and maps. You could take that map, use that compass, and you can figure out where you are. And then you can say, oh, wait a minute, I can see that the map is old now. But now that I know the territory, I don't need to map so much. All right, so now let's start using a new map. The new map is the Four Noble Truths. And the compass is you already know deep inside the difference between right and wrong. But it's been misguided. It's been misguided by a lot of rites, rules, rituals, do it this way, a group of lies, and everything like that. And so we're going to learn to rewrite that compass. And the compass is now going to be pointing at suffering and no suffering. That's going to be the new guideline, so that we're not going to be using the guidelines from the world anymore. We're going to have a higher, more noble way of doing it. And by the way, just one rule, suffering and no suffering, is a whole lot easier to remember than the 10,000 rules that they have in various countries. 80,000 pages of IRS code. So, this is what we mean then, is everything begins to collect together around the unity of the Four Noble Truths. But that's what needs to be inspected. But in fact, many, many senior monks, and I just had a discussion with Dhammarato, an English monk of 27 years. About 3 months ago, I had a talk with him, and he and I were really in there discussing of how the whole Dhamma, for both of us when we were young, looked vast, rich, important, full of details and maybe some magic too. And now we look at it as it's just a little box. It's just a little Chinese. We finally found a way to put the box together, and it's just a little Chinese puzzle. And that's the way that the noble would look at it. It's a noble view to see everything comes together. The Four Noble Truths is like the only way to live. It's absolutely the only way to live. And that we need to inspect the Four Noble Truths to the point that we've got that solid. This is what we mean by taking refuge in the Dhamma, is when we recognize that, hey, this is the only way worth living. Every other way has got suffering in it, but watching out for suffering and learning to avoid it just at the point in time when we need to remember most to avoid suffering. Now we've got it nailed.
So with the note,
go ahead, Derek.
with the noting, should I sit down and expect that I'm gonna follow the breath, get into first jhana, then start the noting? Is that sort of the technique we're talking about now?
Yes and no, both, okay. And neither one. All right.
All right. Okay.
The yes is true. The no means that it's actually both, because the noting will start and continue on as you reach that point of satisfaction. Okay. The point of satisfaction will be there both before, during, and after the noting, or the noting will continue on through that after the real deep satisfaction. But now one of the things that you're noting is satisfaction. Hey, Mick Jagger, I got it, and you don't. And so do this noting joyfully like this. Really allow yourself to be a winner. Start to really enjoy your meditation, because you know with doing it this way, beyond a doubt, that it's useful, it's valuable, it's wholesome, and it will take you out of suffering and take your friends out of suffering along with you. Just by your very nature of changing your ways of behavior, your friends are going to like it. Why? Because if you got your shit together, you're not going to be spending it around now, are you? So this is a way of looking at it, is the noting. Then let's go back and talk about noting. There comes a point in time when the noting gets softer. That is actually right in the very beginning of the noting to do it quite strongly, in the sense of itching, itching, or pressure, like that, to really get the mind beginning to focus in on watching the present moment. Now, in the Goenka method, they do the body scanning in a systematic way, from the top of the head, around the head, down to the shoulders, then one arm, then the other arm, down through the chest, down to one leg, and then the other leg. And sometimes they do it in reverse order, but most of the time it's from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. The other way of doing it is a more natural method, which is one by one as they occur. In other words, you look at what's happening in the body based upon the messages that the body itself is telling you. Other systems have as many as like 28 points in the body, but these are all just small differences between the Burmese and the Goenka and the northern Thailand and the southern Thailand systems and all of that kind of stuff. That they're all actually trying to teach the student to pay attention to what's going on in the body, specifically with the rising and the falling. Anapanasati is really a lot about, in fact, they're all talking about very strongly the ways of operating step 1, 2, and 3 of Anapanasati. The long, deep breath is the one that the students tend to not pay much attention to. And so it's important to emphasize it simply from the point that this is Buddha's #1 instruction. And we already have heard so many times things about beginning at the beginning, start over again, Zen, beginner's mind, never mind, start again from Goenka. The whole tradition has that whenever we remember to, say the mind's been wandering away ever how long, and then we remember to, when we come back to the breath, we come back with a really long, strong, deep breath. This is paramount. That normally when students are sitting in meditation or sitting at a chair in the office, they get tired and drowsy because they're not breathing well. And so the frontal cortex is not getting all the air it needs. And so the human body then will go into kind of semi-shutdown mode where it's hard to think, but that we're reacting with the reptilian brain. We go into survival mode. All right. In fact, the whole body will eventually shut down depending upon the various lack of oxygen reasons and whatnot. The legs will shut down. The arms will shut down. And the last thing that will happen will be that the heart and the reptilian brain will be the only things left. And then after the heart stops, then the only things that's left is what oxygen that can still be fed to the reptilian brain. Well, now, many years ago, they used to judge death based upon, could somebody breathe? They'd put a mirror. And if the breath would come onto the mirror, they could say, oh, he's alive. But if there was no breath on the mirror, then he was dead. Where, in fact, that wasn't the case at all. We now know that CPR can get people breathing again because they're not dead. They're just oxygen deprived, and their body may be shut down. But if you can get those lungs going again, okay. So this is now back to the Buddha. Without going into the detail about how much sports is oriented towards the breath, it's important for the meditation students to recognize that, hey, this is the highest quality sport there is. What sport is that? The sport of mental gymnastics. And we need to learn how to breathe just like the gymnasts do. All right? In fact, the mental gymnastics is a noble gymnastic. How to contort the mind out of the pretzel is in, back into a straight rod. It's easy for Superman to bend that rod into a pretzel, but it is really hard to get it straightened right back out again. And that's what our job is to straighten things out, to get our stuff together. And in that regard, we need to practice it over and over and over and over and over again as often as we can. And when we do practice it, we want to make sure that we practice it not in a semi-half-hearted way, but as strongly as we can. so that we really give ourselves a really good, strong nirvana moment every time we can think of it. Oh, this is so nice. Ain't life wonderful? Too much of a good thing is wonderful. And so you start to enjoy your life, but you have to practice it over and over and over again because your whole habit pattern has been that of a loser, being miserable, wanting things you don't have, not knowing how they get them. Now I'm giving you exactly what is needed. All you have to do is remember to practice, to keep doing it. And every time that you do, you're practicing it correctly when you really like it. The more you like it, the more correctly you're practicing. And no doubt, that's the whole quality here. There's no doubt left about it. Because now we're not wanting something we don't have. We're enjoying something that we know how to manufacture and create right here in the moment. And so then the path becomes, hey, what can we do to spread that throughout the day so that we can get better and better at it? And what can we do when we get ourselves stuck into a state of desire? How can we get ourselves back out of that? Because that will happen from time to time. You can be tooling down the road as happy as you can be and get a flat tire. What are you going to do when you get that flat tire? Are you going to be as happy as you were when you're tooling down the road? Can you stay happy while you open that trunk?
Nope, not at all.
Yes, you can, if you can remember. If you can remember to be noble, if you can remember to stay collected together, if you can take a deep breath, every time Suzuka becomes, okay, oh no, there's a flat tire. Okay, take a deep breath. Open the door of the car. I don't want to change the tire. Take a deep breath. Go back to the back of the car. Open the trunk. Where's all the stuff? Oh, I know how to fix a flat tire. We can get this done. Never mind. No problem here. And then we put the jack in, and while we have to breathe and say, okay, we're going to get this one done. I've done a flat tire before. I can do this one. And pretty soon, we're back in the car tooling down the road again with the thought I'm going to have to get that tire fixed. But other than that, we're back where we were. Now, what's the point of going through all of the bad feelings about the flat tire? Why all of this? I don't like it. What's your choice? Are you going to say I don't like it and therefore I'm not going to fix it? I'm going to sit here in the car and watch the sun fry this poor beast to death? So here's the choice at that level. The choice is you can either feel good about it or feel bad about it. And then also the choice is to either do it or not do it. So you're left with changing the flat tire miserably, not changing the flat tire miserably, or changing the tire happily, or not changing the tire, which may not happen happily. So this is the way that we look at it. It's always a choice. Can you remember that choice at the time that you need it most? The answer is yes, if you keep practicing over and over and over again till you get really good at this song called life. That you've already been as high as you'll ever be. And you've been there many times. The question is, why ain't you there all the time? The answer is, I don't know how. The answer to that is, well, practice. Practice being in that state.
I've got a kid, so I've got plenty of opportunities to practice.
Yes,
I've been doing it a lot. Yeah.
Whenever the kid makes you mad, don't answer. Don't say anything. Use that as a mindfulness moment. Use that as a trick for sati. You begin to get angry at the kids. So the kid's misbehaving. Whatever they do is misbehaving. You let that be a trigger for your mindfulness so that you can get yourself into a really good state before
Mm.
you work with that kid. Because otherwise, you're just going to be spreading your shit
Yeah.
back onto the kid, teaching the kid how to be even worse rather than
Mm.
better.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure when you're approaching that kid, you do it with a big smile.
Hey, I try, but it gets
It's not a
complicated.
matter of try. No, don't. The issue is not trying. The issue is waiting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Waiting until
Yeah.
you're sure that you can deal with
Mm.
the kid.
Mm. Okay.
Get yourself into that Nibbana moment state. Get yourself into that, oh, I'm really satisfied right now that that kid is doing what he's doing. Ooh, that may be a little bit more than just a 3-second in breath. That may take 10.
uh,
That's
yeah.
when you need it most. In your house right now, that's probably when you need this good advice the most, is when you got something with the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And if you change your style, the kids will too. They're like that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. He's crazy. He's crazy.
Where did he get that from? Who was his crazy teacher?
Yeah. That'd have to be
So,
me, I guess.
all right. Well, we can do it better. We can. You already have talked about that. You have those moments of satisfaction. So you bring
Yeah.
those back. You work on those. You make it a habit, so that when the opportunity comes, when the kid does it, this is a Samadhi moment. Where's that lion? I am not a victim of that kid's bad behavior. I'm the noble here. Yeah, that's an important point. You're not the victim of that child's bad behavior.
Mm.
It is only bad because you say it's bad. And you say it's bad because it's unsatisfactory for you. It's not satisfying. So getting yourself into a state of satisfaction so that you're satisfied with whatever the kid is doing, then I'm sure that level of wisdom will be all that's needed for you to deal with that kid without us having to go through any scenarios about what's going on. You'll figure that out
Yeah.
if you bring wisdom to those feelings. That's what this practice is all about. That's why we put cushion time in, is to get used to waking up at just the right time when we need it most.
Mm.
We're going to add some things throughout the day also to help break this thing up so that it happens more and more and more often. 10, 20, 30 times a day. In fact, I will give you both one of the many little things that we have possible. And that is whenever you sit down in a chair, and you sit down often. People are up, down, up, down, up, down all the time. Whenever you sit down in the chair, take a load off. Make that a little Nibbana moment. Remember, oh, as I sit down and take a load off my feet, I'm going to take a load off my mind. And I'm going to take it and bring it to the state of satisfaction. And when I'm completely content and satisfied with what's happening right now, then I'll start to do the work that I set down to do.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
5 seconds, 10 seconds is all it takes. You do this every time you sit down, and wow, your whole life will start to change. One little Nibbana moment after another. A little joy, a little pleasure, a little aha. A little, I got this. This is a nice moment.
Yeah.
So I think this is possibly a pretty good time to stop. We've got a lot of thoughtful eye glances. We got a lot of nods, shaking, and not much questions. So I'm going to exit stage right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dhammarato.
This has been great. I've enjoyed this conversation. This has been delightful. I really like it when students nod and smile and they get it. They really get it.
All right.
I
Appreciate
don't
it.
think there's much doubt and confusion right now, and so I'm going to exit at just
No.
the right moment.
All right.
Enjoy
Have a
your
good one,
day.
guys. Thank you.
Bye bye.
See you.
See you.
Bye.